Good evening and welcome to Perspectives. I'm Sebastian Gomes. Between August 6th and 15th, the Catholic Church in Japan is celebrating the annual 10 Days for Peace, which in particular remembers the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki this week 68 years ago. Cardinal Peter Turkson, the president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, is in Japan and gave an address to religious leaders yesterday morning. He denounced all nuclear weapons, saying, John Paul II properly named the suffering brought by war, specifically by the atom bomb, as the fruit of human sin and the result of evil at work. Pope Francis made a similar clarification. The possession of atomic power can cause the destruction of humanity. When man becomes proud, he creates a monster that can get out of hand. Today, tens of thousands of nuclear weapons are still held by various countries around the world, mostly by the United States and Russia. And with new technologies, each of these bombs is estimated to be at least 30 times more powerful than those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This week, we've been bringing you complete coverage of the 131st Supreme Convention of the Knights of Columbus, which is taking place in San Antonio, Texas. Last night, the state's dinner was held, which is always a lot of fun. Among others, Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York greeted the impressive crowd and offered some remarks. Also, Archbishop Richard Smith of Edmonton and the president of the Canadian Bishops' Conference addressed the Knights. Here is an excerpt from that address.
When we announce the gospel, we are proposing a diet to which much of our Western culture has grown unaccustomed, even allergic. Our diet is centered on the bread of life, Jesus himself, truly present in the Eucharistic species. And transformed by this food, our daily diet becomes that of obedience to truth, the embrace of the cross, and self-gift for the sake of the world. For anyone more accustomed to a diet of selfishness and relativism, such a proposed diet would be impossible to swallow. The stomach recoils. Hence the negative and sometimes vitriolic response to the gospel and to the church that we witness today. The most effective way that we have of proposing that diet we call the gospel is to give witness to the joy that it brings us. Our world is living largely on the junk food of individualism and self-reliance, a diet that leaves one hungry and malnourished. By our joy, we invite those accustomed to this empty diet to taste and see that the Lord is good, and in Christ to find true nourishment in real life.
Also, Cardinal Sean O'Malley, the Archbishop of Boston, addressed the convention, looking particularly at Pope Francis's vision for the Church.
Pope Francis is calling us to embrace the vision of reality that is the Church's faith, and that values each and every human being, and stresses our responsibility to love and serve each other, especially the most vulnerable in our midst. The word that Pope Francis repeats over and over again in his talks is tenerezza, tenderness. In the Feast of St. Joseph, in his inaugural Mass, Pope Francis speaks to us about protecting people, showing loving concern for each and every person, especially children, the elderly, those in need, who are often the last that we think of. He says, we must not be afraid of goodness or tenderness. He points to the heart of Joseph, his tenderness, which is not the virtue of the weak, but a sign of strength of spirit and capacity for concern and compassion and genuine openness to others, and openness for love.
Yesterday, we showed you part of Carl Anderson's annual report to the convention. He is, as you know, the Supreme Knight of Columbus, and afterwards he had a chance to sit down with our Father Tom Rosica on the Salt and Light set.
As you've just given the State of the Union address in this incredible assembly, what's one hope you'd like to see realized over the next fraternal year? Something that you really long for and wish to see blossom?
Well, I would hope that more young men would come into the Knights of Columbus, be part of the strong right arm of the Church that's reaching out. And look, our societies are really at a crossroads. They're at a crossroads in the sense, are we going to maintain and deepen those values of the gospel that make society worth living and a humane society? Or are we going to move in a different direction, which is going to become more alienated, maybe more, as the Pope says, selfish or indifferent to the needs of others? Or are we going to be a more caring society? That's what's really at issue. Are we going to respect human dignity? Are we going to have room for everybody? That's what the Knights are committed to. And so I hope more men join us in that effort.
This morning, the convention continued with Mass, with Cardinal Donald Wuerl, the Archbishop of Washington, presiding, and Cardinal Francis George of Chicago giving the homily. Here is an excerpt from that homily.
And so today, gratefully, we contemplate the wonder of God's grace, the gift of his very life in the Blessed Virgin Mary, and also in ourselves. For the wonder is not only that our life itself is changed, but that once graced, we truly cooperate with God. We are truly ourselves co-workers, so that God can use us in such a way that his will for the world will be accomplished.
The Knights also inaugurated the Immaculate Conception Marian Prayer Program, for which Archbishop Gerald Lacroix of Quebec and Primate of Canada shared a few remarks. To read all the full texts of the speeches given at this year's Knights Convention, you can visit the Salt and Light blog. And one final note about this convention: the annual memorial mass for deceased Knights will be aired on Salt and Light TV and streamed on our website at 9 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning. That's August 8th. Archbishop William Laurie of Baltimore, who is the Supreme Chaplain for the Knights of Columbus, will celebrate and preach for that Mass. Please join us. Yesterday was a very important day, the Feast of the Transfiguration. It was also the anniversary of Pope Paul VI's death. The late Pope reigned from 1963 to 1978, bringing the Second Vatican Council to a close and implementing its reforms. In a tribute to him, we leave you tonight with these historic images, courtesy of our friends at Catholic News Service. Thanks for watching. Good night.